Kia ora everyone, and welcome to the third session for today as part of the Tech Pulse 2020 TIN report launch. This afternoon, our session is building resilience in leaders, teams and businesses. And we've got a stellar panel lined up to talk to you. We're going to go to a pre-recorded session. Leading the discussion will be Steve Cotton, the Regional Manager for Absolute IT, a TIN sponsor. Savannah Peterson from the United States, from Savvy Millennial. She's a Forbes 30 under 30. I wish I was one of the 30 under 30. Maria Potter, psychologist from Fuel 50. Dale Smith, who's the CEO and formerly an accountant. He runs a company called Javelin that we'll talk about later. And Dwayne O'Brien, who's the tech leader for Serco. So just a little bit of housekeeping. So throughout the event, we'll be running polls so you can have your vote on various questions listed. If you have any questions in terms of anything you want answered, click the questions tab on your screen or the TIN Tech Showcase tab. If you have anything that you want answered, there's a 90-second video in terms of watching to find out how you manage Swapcard. So reach out if you have any questions, go through into Swapcard, contact Bettina or any of the TIN team. If you want to buy a copy of the TIN report, it's available, special sales message alert at a 20% discount, or want to make any inquiries about being a TIN member, please follow up with Bettina or any other of the TIN team. So without further ado, I'm now going to pass across to Steve Cotton for a pre-recorded chat session with the speakers that we've named. Thanks.
So welcome to today's Tech Pulse panel discussion on building resilience in individuals, in business and in leaders. Hi, my name's Steve Cotton. I'm the Auckland Regional Manager for Absolute IT, New Zealand's largest tech recruiter. Absolute IT has been a proud supporter of TIN for the last 4 years. And this year, when it became apparent that this event was going to go virtual, Greg Shanahan, his team and I got together and had a good chat about what we felt the TIN community would be most interested in hearing about. And look, given the extraordinary year that we've all had, the issue of resilience is certainly something that resonated with all of us and that we hope will provide good value for you guys today in the TIN community. So thank you so much for tuning in, and we really hope you get good benefit out of today's session. 2020 has been an extraordinary year by any measure, and certainly called on all of our resilience as people, as leaders, and on our businesses. From a recruitment perspective, 2020 certainly has some challenges. You may be interested to know that the April lockdown saw job ad volumes drop to some 20% of where they were a year ago. And while they have recovered to 80% currently, with the borders still closed and the dwindling numbers of returning Kiwis and the lack of available talent, 2020 continues to ask questions of our resilience as a business. But what exactly does resilience mean for you, and how do you go about building resilience in businesses and in individuals? To help us discuss this further and take a bit of a deep dive, I'm super proud to introduce a phenomenally talented and international team of panel experts. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Dwayne O'Brien. Dwayne is the CTO of Serco and a technology leader with over 25 years of experience. Dwayne currently leads a global team designing, building and running Serco's platforms and products. I'm sure most of you will be aware that Serco develops solutions for the tourism sector. So obviously 2020 has been a challenging year. Welcome, Dwayne. And if I could sum up 2020 in 5 words, what would you have to say?
Look, thanks, Stephen. It's good to be here. I actually found it quite hard to narrow it down to 5 words, if I'm really honest. But I did think about that. And firstly, challenging. Obviously, unprecedented year. Something that was strong in our team was empathy. Really understanding what it was like to work with, kids running around in the background and different partners trying to work from home and that sort of thing. Isolation. So, particularly staff living alone was a real challenging thing during lockdown. But coming out the other end of that, galvanizing. There's nothing like having a really, difficult situation to deal with to galvanize a team, and more positively and more recently, opportunity. So in these times of, a lower customer engagement, the teams can focus more and look at what we can do and how we can push forward to the future.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. Great to have you with us, Dwayne. Secondly, Savannah Savvy-Peterson, who is a Forbes 30 Under 30 alum in consumer tech, an international public speaker, a community builder, and an innovation strategist, a New Zealand High Tech Awards judge, and a Sir Edmund Hillary Fellow, who joins us from San Fran. Welcome, Savvy. And,
hello.
Hello. And for you, 2020 in 5 words, what would you say?
Woo. So this was a doozy, and I appreciate you giving us the heads up so we could give it a ponder. And being a storyteller, I took it more as a sentence challenge than an individual word challenge. So for me, I agree with the isolation. I said that 2020 so far has been isolated, gratitude-inducing, grounded limbo. So I feel very trapped between 2 worlds, between America and the United States. I was in New Zealand when y'all shut down, made the choice to come back and be on this side of the Pacific, which has been very interesting for the last 9 months and has certainly tested my resilience in a lot of different capacities. But I am, as Dwayne just mentioned, one of those folks who does live alone and has been very isolated for a long time. So connecting with my community has been a really unique challenge, but also led to some unique discoveries and new ways of engaging. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Thanks so much. And interesting that there's certainly some resonance between those two. I thoroughly recommend you all read Savvy's blog on becoming a Sir Edmund Hillary Fellow. It's resilience to a T. Well, I'll post a link to that somewhere. And last and by no means least, we're thrilled to have Dale Smith with us, who is the CEO of Javelin, a world-class intelligent insurance and data integration software company, formed in 2011. Dale is passionate about technology and how it can help New Zealand businesses improve productivity. So yeah, Dale, same question. 2020 for you in 5 words.
Thanks, Steve. Again, everyone, thanks for having us. Really appreciate the opportunity. Really agreeing with Dwayne and Savvy's comments. For us, I think, firstly, like everyone, the first word that came to mind for me was disruption. So, when everything went down sort of early in March, it was extremely disruptive. And then moving on from there, I think we've seen, certainly for us, we're cautiously optimistic about certainly the New Zealand environment, the Australian environment where we're focused, and where we're taking our business. So I think one of the other key words for me is really family. So for us, we've been really focused on family and what effect this has had on the families of our people, and there's no doubt that it's been extremely disruptive, as I said before. But family is very, very strong for us in our business.
Excellent, perfect. Yeah, well said. Thank you so much for your thoughts there, guys. So that's the panel. We have had to pre-record the session for timing reasons, but at the end of the session, there is going to be an opportunity to jump onto a live Q&A session to discuss this topic further, and I'll remind you of that when we get to the end. But let's take a deep dive into this issue of resilience. And in question 1, I'd love to get to know your thoughts on what exactly resilience is. And is there an order to what comes first? Is it resilient people, resilient business, or resilient leaders? Dale, your thoughts?
Thanks, Steve. I think for my thinking is certainly people. If you can build resilience in your teams, it goes right through from leaders and into your business. So for us, we focus heavily on giving our people the support that they need. And for us, resilience is about support. Certainly from our perspective, it really does start with people.
Yeah, excellent. And Savvy, from your perspective?
I love that, Dale. And I went back and forth personally between whether I felt that this was a leader thing or a people thing. And obviously, you don't have a leader without people. So that's something to do with it. But that said, for the sake of making this diverse and dynamic, resilience to me is the ability to get up in the face of a day that you know you're going to fail and it's probably going to hurt. And you don't know what's coming next, but you do it, and you do it with conviction, and you do it with a sense of dignity and integrity, and with a candor that your team can be proud of. And that doesn't matter if you're in the face of a pandemic or a business challenge or a deal falling through, or even resiliency in times of success, because there can be real challenges to culture when things are going great as well. And so for me, I think it's now more than ever, it's important for the resilient leaders. And it doesn't matter where they are in your hierarchy, but the resilient leaders to rise, because we need to, as a community of business people and honestly just inhabitants of this glorious, beautiful planet, we need to learn from more empathetic and compassionate leadership than we've had in the past. You can see what's happened in places where leaders did not put the value of human life above other things. And we find ourselves in a very uniquely dichotomous world right now. So I think the organizations that I'm seeing and that I work with at Savvy, and even just that I'm watching run and do well despite the current climate, are those that are led by people who have the ability to be agile with empathy and create a sense of purpose, even when we literally don't know what the day or what the week is going to bring.
Terrific. Yeah, that's very well said. Dwayne, your thoughts?
I was considering the people business leaders, and I finally landed on the fact it's a little bit chicken and egg in terms of the people and the leaders, because I think that it's very difficult to develop resilient people without resilient leaders, but there had to be resilient people to start that process in the first place. So I suppose I finally landed on the practicality of of resilient leaders being able to create the time, the space for people to be able to deal with challenges and situations, provide the guidance for them. And then obviously, that really culminates in the organisation following. So the organisation really being an outcome of the people and leaders within it, is what I think. In terms of what it means to me, I try to simplify it right down to its, an ability to kind of recover. There has to be some kind of, really challenging situation that you're facing for resilience to come through. Otherwise, it's something that we don't really need to draw upon. And when we do draw upon it, we need to draw pretty deeply normally. So, whether that be something that's painful or stressful, it could be anything from, we've seen with the global pandemic, but it can be abuse, it can be bullying, it could be financial loss, it could be a whole bunch of things that sometimes are in our personal lives and sometimes is in our professional lives. I think what we found in 2020 is that we all shared the same scenario, the same challenge globally. And I think that was painful at times, but also really helpful, because we could draw upon other people in other situations. We had to work in different ways. And we had to really turn the table in terms of the way that we led our staff, asking them what they really needed, as opposed to what we think that we should be doing. So I think that I've personally learned a lot from this year. And it's really made me double down on the fact that at least 50% of my time should be focused on touching base with people in my team, whether it be direct reports, whether it be really deep into the team, and making sure everyone's health, well-being is in place, and that we are dealing with people with, with compassion and with kindness.
Yes, excellent. Thanks so much for your thoughts there, guys. And Savvy, you touched on company culture, and how that can affect resilience in both both good times and challenging times, I guess. So how does company culture affect resilience?
Well, in a lot of ways, I don't think you can be resilient if you don't have a good company culture. And yeah, maybe the product will survive because it is recession proof, or it happens to be a necessity and you found a great niche, or it's very, very defensible. But the reality is, viruses spread from within organizations all the time. This pandemic is actually just a greater metaphor for a lot of what we see when culture breaks inside an organization. And it's like glitter, right? If one person is crafting with glitter in the room, everyone's crafting with glitter. And if someone is bringing a toxic attitude to the workplace, or bringing a victim attitude, something that we've been talking about a lot is the difference between victim and survivor. So it's very easy to play victim right now. Crap, a lot of things have happened. Geez. I think even those of us who are extremely privileged have taken some very massive, severe blows this year. But the flip side is, and we always try and we try and look at the arc at Savvy, is so we have a moment of victim. You're allowed to feel poor, taken in, whatever, whine, have your moment, right? This sucks. We can all agree. This isn't the 2020 we wanted. Cool, great. Now it's time to move on. And you go into survivor mode, which is, okay, what do we need to do together to survive? What does my team need? And so my job shifted very much from growth to survival. And survival was about keeping the team happy, making sure that everyone's families were going to be taken care of, that we had enough recession-proof, pandemic-proof, if that's even a thing, business to carry us through, and keeping our culture tight. Because I knew no matter what happens, I could probably, well, it was my job as the leader to figure out the business application for us moving forward. But really, culturally, as long as everyone still believed in the sense of purpose and that we were going to be okay, I knew no matter what the work looked like, we could get through it. And then the top tier of that, so victim, survivor, and then you go into warrior mode. And that's when you're in an active growth mode. And when you're all united across the front and everyone has the same goal, it's very easy to activate. And you understand the vision and the mission and the ethics, because warriors aren't just banshees running around, as anarchists. It's a unified force that has an incredible sense of community and believes in something greater than their individual contribution. And that's what we're always trying to drive for when we're building a resilient culture.
Cool, awesome. Dale, what are your thoughts? How does company culture affect resilience?
Well, I think again, I think a lot obviously, but I think it really does come to support, back down to support. I think a lot of individuals are affected not only from within the business and the business culture, but people's individual lives are affected, and as leaders, I think we need to be cognizant with our culture that the business people's lives are affected in all sorts of ways that we don't know about. So culture of support, we talk about a high performance culture, but certainly this year we've seen that our culture has been affected mostly by providing the support to our people, the goals, their lives, their families, etc. We're very insular, I think, can be insular as leaders, and not seeing how other people's lives are affected by external things outside of the business. So really, it's culture is huge. It's massive, certainly in an environment like this, and how we approach this pandemic. And certainly, I think it's actually now the next step. What happens next? How do we use our culture to move forward with our businesses and our people in the right direction? So culture is huge. It doesn't really get any bigger than that, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that's got some resonance again with our environment. Obviously, recruitment's a very target-driven environment, and we've had to morph our culture somewhat to move away from the target being the be-all and end-all into some bigger thinking around that stuff. And I think there's a tremendous opportunity for us to learn through that. So I couldn't agree more. Dwayne, what are your thoughts? How does company culture affect resilience?
Oh, look, I think probably along similar lines to Dale and Savvy. I think that the interesting thing about the culture aspect is that you kind of need that before you go into something that's really challenging, and you need resilience. So it's not something that you can go, hey, listen, we're facing something like a pandemic or some other kind of major incident with your business or with the environment, and then looking to develop that at the time. It's something that you need to have already have banked. I think that as leaders, we set the tone of culture in the organisation, of our behaviour, how we interact with each other, how we support each other, and really at one end we can set one of quite high volatility all the way through one of stability, and it's the stability tone that's really important, because it means that as the company faces challenges in the background, often the board, the executive, the senior management are working incredibly hard in all ways, and staff don't always see that, but that's when we really earn our money. That's when we're there to step up and to make sure that we do everything from create a conversation of calmness and stability, all the way through to working as hard as we can to realise that we need to keep as many people and families fed as possible. So I think that comes all the way back to what's the culture you want in your organisation, so that when opportunities or difficulties come up, because they're both going to, how can you pivot quite quickly and maximise on those, whether it be from a survival mode through to a thrive mode. So I think just taking a lens at the company. Are you agile? Are you tenacious? Are you supportive of each other? Are you innovative in a situation where you're going to have to work in very different ways? You're going to help your staff walk out the door with wheeling chairs of laptops and screens and all sorts of stuff, because what's coming, and really just talking to them about the fact that it's probably going to be 3 months. That's what we were saying on the first weeks of lockdown, and dealing with the kind of people freaking out and going, hey, look, it's going to be okay. This is how we're going to deal with it. And probably, I think, moving on to a question coming, starting the process of opening up even a stronger communication channel, because that's probably been the very best thing for us that we've done since the start of the year. A constant, ongoing, positive, calm communication, transparent. So, and all of those things directly impact on the way that the staff, I think, see leadership and the overall culture of the organisation.
Excellent. Thanks so much for those thoughts. Slightly off topic, I know, but yeah, a memory for me of that first lockdown is the ground floor, the basement car park, and people ploughing plants and all sorts of things in the back of their cars as we shot away, not knowing when we'd be back. It was extraordinary, wasn't it? Yeah. And Jen,
it's still like that over here, for the record.
Yeah.
So you all speak of lockdown in past tense, and we are literally entering what's really like our third wave of lockdowns here. Restaurants closed again. Everyone's isolated. They're advising us against travel in the US. So, I mean, I think it's very interesting having this dialogue, and I just want to point this out because the international audience watching, we're at very different stages in this. I hear you all speak of this as past tense. It's very present for us, and I think it's very present in the global economy as well, and that's one of those cultural things where sometimes on calls with clients, I have my writing partners in Berlin, and our lives have been extremely different for the last 9 months, and every now and again we just have to have a check-in and say, hey, how are you really doing today? And how is your heart? And how is your mental health? Because you didn't just get to go out and see friends this weekend like some people did. I don't. There's still less than 10 people in my bubble and have been for literally almost 9 months. So it's a dynamic, it's a constant ebb and flow. And especially if you're a scaling business right now in New Zealand, looking at interacting with markets, trust me, we're stoked to be working with you. I'm so thrilled to be working with as many Kiwis as I am always, but also be sure and approach with a tone of empathy. We have not gone to a rugby game or a concert yet. It's still very, very different for us.
Oh, well, thank you, Savvy. That's a very pertinent point. And I love to everybody who's watching overseas, we are mindful of that, and I guess feeling quite blessed that we're in the position that we are but we certainly haven't lost sight. And I know all of us have got friends and colleagues and business connections overseas. So warmest thoughts to you all. Following on from something Dwayne was saying about the communication, I mean, how does transparency in communication with your team play a role in creating this resilience? Al, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, it's. I mean, this pandemic has provided an opportunity, I think, to see how important communication is. But communication, not just through this environment, but is really important to an organisation, and specifically now. So, and not just communication for the sake of communication. It's honesty and making sure that your team are aware of the situation. I think the other thing that sort of springs to mind, we're talking a lot about this pandemic, and obviously it's front of mind for everyone, but there's other issues for...
Sorry, excuse me.
That's all right, no worries. For tech businesses that are always front of mind, raising capital, building teams, scaling smartly. So I think there's certainly some lessons that we've learned through this pandemic, and communication is just one of them. But open and honest communication, that helps culture, it helps resilience, it helps, it really binds your team together. Communication for us throughout the pandemic, and I'm talking about that again, was very, very regular, not just on a business level, but also our team leaders were encouraged to talk to our people at a personal level as well, and really trying to pick up on some of the other key issues that might exist for people external to our business. So communication is extremely important, not just throughout this pandemic, but moving forward as well.
Fabulous. Thanks so much, Tal.
All right.
Dwayne, your thoughts?
I think it's massive. I think, transparent communication builds trust and cohesion in the team. There are things that, that I know. I mean, I was originally a software engineer, and I would not often know whether I was to turn left or turn right. And what I mean by that is should I do something tactically or should I do something more strategically? I remember when I was younger, I always said to myself, look, when I'm in a position of leadership, I will over communicate so that when the teams are making decisions every day, whether they're on my team in Auckland, whether they're in Minnesota, whether they're in our China team, so that every day they know where we're going, why we're doing it, and they can make decisions within their realm that line up against that. It might not mean I'm communicating directly to them, but as an example, every Monday morning I come in, I jump on Slack, I go into Ask CTO channel, and I tell everyone exactly what I'm doing this week and why we're doing it. And that's also a channel in which anyone in the company asks me questions, or if I receive a question over a water cooler, I actually go back to Slack, I post it in that channel, and I post the answer as well, just so that anyone who wasn't in the office, in the room, in the country is able to hear, hopefully, something out of that maybe they were thinking the same thing. So I think sometimes I'm described as over transparent, over communicating, but I'd rather have it that way. I'd say to people, if you ask me, I'll tell you. And it may change over time because my thoughts change or the company's position change, but I'll always be very, very direct about what we're doing and why we're doing it. And sometimes that can be enjoyable and sometimes that can be a little painful, but at least we all know where we're going and why we're doing something. So I think it's incredibly important.
Thanks so much. And Sally, your thoughts on transparency and communication?
Oh my goodness. Well, I basically built a business out of this. So I'm super, super passionate about transparent communication. I am nothing if not hard on my sleeve as both a founder and as a business and as a woman. So it's two things a couple of things I want to talk about, but I want to mention this before I forget to, because I get excited about everything else I'm going to say. It's not just about what you communicate, it's about how you set up the communication structure within your team. And I want to point out something that Dwayne said there that I think is really important, is different time zones and async. And I think async communication has become so important. And it's especially imperative because our days are not predictable in any sense. I mean, life was never predictable, really. But now, especially, things can change and can change in very dramatic ways very, very quickly. And if we don't have communication strategies in place that allow for people to be able to communicate when they can, and then to step away when they can, knowing that they can come back and see how to get caught up at whatever hour of the day that may be, it de-stresses some of the process. And we were largely async before this, but we've shifted to almost exclusively async, unless it's a launch day or something very, very, very time sensitive in real time, to save everyone the stress of having, we don't even, spoiler alert, we don't use Slack at Savvy Millennial. We have other communication channels because it created too much of a real-time expectation from the team, and it was creating stress. So we've actually pulled away from that. Everyone can do whatever they want. Obviously, I think Slack is great if your team is large. We're small, so we have the ability to do a lot of different things. But one of the other notes, and this is actually how you found me. So Steve and I have never met. He read my blog post, which was very nice of him, and asked me to be here, which is very sweet, and nothing makes a content creator happier than something like that transpiring. But as he saw in that blog post, there's actually a video of me crying on Twitter that's included and embedded in that blog post. It's a happy cry, promise. It's not a sad cry. But emotions, I'm a bit like Dwayne. I'm a little, I've never been told I wasn't emotional, let's put it that way. But on the flip side, because me as a personal brand, and some of our work as a consultancy is like this, but some of it isn't. It depends on the audience. But me as a personal brand is very outspoken and emotional and raw. When people come to work with me, they know that in our company culture, we hold space for feelings, and it's going to be okay. That I would rather you showed up and told me you couldn't, versus today, for whatever reason, then we're trying to hide it and we're poorly performing for another reason. It's okay to take time. Wednesday after the US election, guess what? My team, I gave everyone the option. My team showed up to work. I didn't. I couldn't. So it's okay, and you have to lead by example and take your own advice that way. I just told everyone, hey, guess what? Trust you all to lead the meetings today. I'm not going to be there emotionally. I'm not going to be mentally in the headspace that I need to be in. So I'm going to let you do it. Let me know if you need anything. You can text me, whatever. But if you're going to create a culture where you can be transparent, it really does start from the top down. This is not something that can start from the bottom. People get judgy. People think there's a certain way to the top. And in my case, if they know that the top is a total bleeding heart empath who deeply cares about people and occasionally cries about animals on Instagram, like, it's okay. You can bring anything to me, and I want that to be a safe space. And that goes for our clients. That goes for anything. The more we know, the more transparent we are across all of the systems and throughput in our business, the easier it is for us to recognize problems long before they start, for us to quell them when they're small, and for us to create a culture where everyone feels supported wherever they are in a given day. And I think one of the things, not everyone has to make videos of them crying and send them out to the world. That's my own choice. But there is a level of being transparent when you fail and when you're messy. Because I think sometimes people will talk about transparency, and it's like the classic founder story in the garage after they've IPO'd. They're like, oh yeah, it was really hard, and transparently, we weren't sure we were going to make it, but now we're all billionaires. Well, great. That's not actually transparency. That's sharing a timeline of successful events, right? So transparency is the failure in the process before, or Dwayne in his CTO chat, which I think is super awesome, is being like, hey, last week we tried this and it didn't work. Guess what? That's cool. Like, and you know what? And like, sometimes I'll be like, that was my call, or I thought we should pitch it like that, and I blew it. Sorry, guys. Thanks for humoring me, or thanks for listening to me. And it's just as important to be transparent about mental health as it is about success, as it is about failure. Because once you have a culture of honesty and trust, everyone knows they can rely on each other to do the best that everyone can, and it inherently fosters a sense of community. It takes a lot of work, but once your team feels like a community, they'll become more resilient than if they weren't.
Wow, thanks so much, guys. That was awesome. And I really do feel like we could talk all morning about this, and in your case, Savvy, all afternoon. But that is all the time we have this morning. So that does conclude our panel discussion. As I mentioned at the beginning, there will be a live Q&A session hosted by TIN's very own Greg Shanahan and a couple of special speakers. So please do stick around for that and jump on the live Q&A. And please do reach out to Savvy, Dale, Dwayne and I to further the discussion in person. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for watching. Really hope you got good value out of this morning. So be safe, and I look forward to catching up with you all very soon. Thank you so much. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, Steve.
I've just been watching that, as you all have. I'm really enjoying the dialogue. So I've a heap of questions here. But although he's not listening, and a big thank you to Steve Cotton and to Savvy, to Maria, Dale, and Dwayne. We're now going to go to the interactive bit, and I understand Savvy has just joined us.
Hello.
Hello.
So
Hey,
nice
welcome.
to be here. Thank you.
Savvy, I'm not sure if we've met, but now I feel like we're old friends.
That's exactly how I want you to feel, Greg. I apologize for not being here sooner, but I'm glad I could make it right now for this.
Oh no, I'm really grateful that you could be here, and the same with Dale and Maria. Hey, we've covered some of this, but I'm going to go with a thread of discussion. So don't want to go over old stuff, but just some of the stuff around maybe 3 points on what are the key characteristics of building resilient businesses. And just by way of thread in previous discussions, I was saying earlier that when talking to tin company CEOs, Savvy, you've got such a big opportunity for your business in New Zealand, that the whole issue around transparency and resilience is the single biggest topic around CEOs, and particularly in times of uncertainty. And so from your own experiences, just maybe 3 things that you think are the key characteristics to building resilient businesses.
So it's tough to pick 3 because there's a lot of different things we could talk about, but I'm actually very deliberately wearing my Matt Brown "She Is Not Your Rehab" shirt today. I don't know if y'all are familiar with Matt Brown. If you're not, you need to watch his TED Talk right now. He's a barber down on the South Island, and he's creating a safe space for male vulnerability. And I think that that's one of the first things that I would include is there need to be safe spaces for everyone. And that starts with leadership creating safe spaces for people to ask silly questions, as well as tough questions, as well as challenging business questions. The feedback loops are really broken in conventional structures, and that's part of the reason we're struggling to have empathy. And I think that empathy is the other key here, where if you are assuming that everyone feels like, and this came up a little bit in the panel, as you saw, if you're assuming that everyone is wild and free and able to go to a rugby game, and you're on the phone with someone who's in a very lockdown situation like we are here, it's a totally different dialogue. And so finding ways to be empathetic, but none of that is possible unless you fundamentally are curious and ask questions with the intent to listen. And I think that that's really the gap. People do feedback once a year. You often get a performance report once a year, maybe twice. Hello, you're thinking about a lot of different things all the time. And if the only time you check in with your company is when everything's going great or everything's going terrible, you're really missing the opportunity to build that resilience in between, because what's going to give you the spring when the bottom falls out is if you have that tight-knit culture going in. So don't be afraid of the feels, in short.
Awesome, thank you. Dale.
Nice to see you again, Savvy. Yeah, look, I think it starts with effective leadership. It's a key characteristic of resilient businesses. An organisational empathy and a deep understanding of your talent. That's also really important, not in just business, but also personally. I'm a strong believer that businesses are rewarded by their people or talent when they've demonstrated empathy towards them, and sort of picking up on that point, Savvy, as well. But resilience, in our view, is a result of demonstrated understanding. It's all good to just to talk about it, but it's really important that businesses demonstrate to their talent total respect in the role they play in businesses, and making sure they have a clear understanding of the part they play in the overall strategy. I think that's also a key characteristic. And finally, also just really making sure that there's the right support. There's the right support for your people and their families and all the things that are important to them. So yeah, those are sort of some of the key characteristics I see.
Maria.
Nice. So just as a wee introduction, I know you both know. I know you both know Sally and Dale, but I'm an industrial organisational psychologist. I've spent my career studying human behaviour at work. So for me, being on this panel is an absolute pleasure, and I'm so pleased that I can come and share my thoughts. So in regards to characteristics of a resilient organisation, I think there's been a huge amount of beautiful characteristics that have bubbled up over the recorded session and your response now. But something I noted that hasn't come up yet is organisational structure. Now there's quite a bit of feedback. I'm not sure if that's my line. Is organisational structure. So when we start looking at organisations, these old school hierarchical organisations that have large layers of management and leadership are renowned for being slow to move. Their people are so far from the customers. They don't have even and distributed power. So what we're seeing now is that those flatter organisations that are more agile, all of their people have more power to make decisions and to drive change in the in an organisation.
Such a good point. I'm so glad you brought that into this.
Right. So yeah, organisational structure is quite different, and this term agility is coming up more. Typically, agility was a design methodology in tech, but now we're seeing agile working practices popping up in finance and HR, and it's this concept of flattening it out and making people more working together collaboratively to be able to kind of work fast and innovatively through challenge. Now, another thing that I wanted to add, again, I've got so many thoughts here, but I just want to add things over and above what the other fantastic panelists have already said, is to me, one of the key ingredients to a resilient organisation is trust. And I think great leadership requires even greater fellowship. And I believe that we've seen a beautiful case study of this in the world this year when we're talking about the global pandemic. And we've seen how countries have responded. And Savvy, you actually brought this up in the recorded webinar. And you could see that there was a direct correlation between a country's level of trust in their government and their leaders and their ability to have confidence in the decisions being made, to be compliant, and the direct outcome of that was saved lives. So for me, just to summarise, there's key characteristics to resilient organisations are flatter organisational structures and an infusion of trust. And trust is something that's ever so difficult to build.
Oh,
I just want to just snap you on that, because trust is also the tenement of remote work. So considering a lot of teams are still remote or partially hybrid, if nobody trusts each other and the system, you're going to fail. Like it's not going to be resilient. I had a basketball coach that told us if you trusted in yourself, your team, and the system, you would usually win. And I actually fundamentally think that applies to most of life at this stage. So good point. Go for it, Greg.
In the discussions that we've had, I guess one of the things that at TIN is really to say, where is the competitive position for the New Zealand technology sector? And I have a personal belief, maybe it's an opinion rather than an understanding, so you can tell me if I'm wrong or right. But the way we relate to each other and the directness of our communication, I think, is quite unique. And I've lived in the States for about 3 years. That was a long time ago. But what really struck me when I was there was the absence of trust, particularly between strangers. You know, that if you really engaged in a transaction, if I took my jacket to the dry cleaners, I had to sign a waiver absolving them of any responsibility for damage, that they wouldn't be sued. There's a veneer that stands between people when you haven't got trust. And so a lot of the discussions that throughout the past 2 days are saying, I'm amazed at how impressive our entrepreneurs are, people like Dale and the other leaders of these tech businesses in terms of the empathy with their staff. So the MO is one, transparency. So virtually every company using some amount of technology opened their books at the start of COVID to their staff and said, this is where we are, this is what we're going to do going forward, this is what it means to you. So with transparency came trust. People said, okay, I know I need to do this to address the situation, so they felt empowered. And with trust, they got cohesion. And then with cohesion, they got the ability to respond quickly. And so I've just been amazed how quickly and agile companies have been from all those things. And so, yeah, I mean, this is not something I've understood for a long time. So I'm communicating what I've learned just recently. But then how do you scale that? And saying, well, I've got this company of 10, 20, 30 people, I want to have 2,000. And how do you use, so how do you create that community feeling? And increasingly, how do you engage with technologies? We've spoken about Slack, Trello, Teams. Within New Zealand, there's a whole range, Fuel 50, I'm just trying to think, Joyous is another one, a whole raft of companies looking to make those sort of processes repeatable. So I'd be interested to find out how you create that community and how you use technology to make those relationships and processes scalable.
I'll start because you just went into the Americans, so I might as well. First of all, I'm sorry we were assholes to you, Greg, but I can't say I speak for all of us. We're not the most trusting nation, but if you look at our leadership, it's really not a shock. So, and also if you look at the way that venture capital works, it's also not a shock. So I think that one of the things that really helps with scaling, and of course, it's very easy to talk about a cozy nested office that feels good when the employee number is small. And even I run a small business. But I do a lot of work with GitLab, and I've learned a lot from them over the course of the pandemic, really. And one of the things that always strikes me about their culture is, one, it's very well knit, despite the fact that they're 1,800 all remote employees. And it's largely due to documentation. They document their culture like they document their code. And when you have a place where people can come to learn about whatever it is, right? It could be the cultural history of something. It could be what budget is available for fun or pandemic activities, or where to find mental health resources right now, for example. And they create this space so everyone knows where to find everything, or everything can be answered in a link. That's one of their goals. And yeah, this is very linear and a bit techie. But I do think that when everyone has the same guidebook for how to engage, it actually creates a much safer space for engagement, because people know what's in bounds and what's out of bounds. And, some of us who are more entrepreneurial, we're a little wild. We're all over the map. I love that you just brought up Joyous. Mike Carden's a dear friend of mine. He and I are characters in the entrepreneurial space. Some people are much more process focused and very oriented. Not that he isn't, not speaking for him, but equal banshee to myself. So I speak lovingly in this regard. And I think that that's something that's missing, right? People often talk about culture. When I was just asking a VC yesterday what the culture was of this company so that I could help build a community around their culture. And he said, well, the culture's passionate. That's not an answer, just to be clear. Culture is a defined set of values and vision that roll up to the overall company objective and goal for the whole reason everyone shows up to work every day. But culture is a feeling. It's a sense of belonging. It's how your community speaks about the way they feel at work when they're not at work. And if you just say it's passionate, well, that sounds like workhorse machines to me and not like an empathetic engine. So be conscious of that. Yeah. Dale, what are you thinking up there? It's nice to see you again.
Dale?
Yeah. Well, where do you start? I think one key point, is building a community in an organisation like ours could and most likely is entirely different to building a community in a different business. I think we'll attract people that are aligned with our community and what we do. I think generally though, in terms of some of the things that we've used in the past is really about making sure we're providing the right support. And an example of that is information. Where do you go to get information to for that support, whether it be for business or personal. Being empathetic to your talents at all times, both business and personal lives. In Javelin, we have a value of one of our core values is that family comes first. And so, and I've talked a lot about that, but it's something that I really believe in. And this one value has had a massive contribution to the Javelin community. So people want to work with people that demonstrate through actions, not just talk, but actions, that they contribute to their communities. And one of the things that I think is that technology businesses are changing so fast, with growth and having to pivot, etc. That having the right community is the sort of thing that binds your talent together, whatever's happening in the business or externally. And how we've built our community, as I said at the start, is different to how other businesses have built it. But making sure you've got that support, and if you don't have a strong community in your organisation now, do whatever it takes to build it, because it has a massive payback. Once you've got that community feel. So it's great.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't pay Dale to say that, just for the record, but thank you for just validating the entire industry that people thought I was an alien for building a business in. Thank you.
So I adore this question, and it's because, again, I'm an industrial organizational psychologist, and I look at global trends and I try and see how these are affecting the workplace. So this question of community is really been on the forefront of almost all of my clients' minds this year. And that really was born out of the Black Lives Matter movement. We saw millions of people marching in solidarity to people irrespective of who you are, where you pray, the colour of your skin, your sexuality, being accepted in your communities, but in your workplaces. So for me, I have global organisations in all over the world saying, how can we build a community where every single one of our employees feels valued and they feel like they can give their contributions. So this is really, really big. I know what the terms we use is creating an inclusive culture, and the outcome we're trying to drive in employees is that feeling of belonging. So when we think about that, there's a few things. It's about feeling valued, so each employee feels heard. They feel recognised for their work. All of these lovely points that have been raised in the session today. Savvy, you referenced this before about people feeling safe, feeling like they're in an environment where they can constructively challenge. Issues aren't a problem. There's something to overcome together. People feeling empowered to grow, change, shift, and finally everyone feeling respected in terms of equality and fairness. But when I have clients and organisations coming to me and saying, Maria, help us turn the dial to create a community, my response is always the same. And I'm going to share that with you today. I say, start by defining what this community means to your organisation. Is it belonging? What does it mean? What does it taste? What does it smell, taste, touch, feel? What does it look like? Once you define that, then investigate your current state. Have a look at exit interviews, engagement surveys if you take them, informal chats, run a focus group to understand your current state against your level of community in your organisation, and then identify strengths and weaknesses and create a plan to try and close those gaps. And Greg, to your question, that's where we can talk about different types of technology. Savvy, you referenced before that you're reasonably analog, you don't use Slack, and your employees, there's no silver bullet. Your employees will tell you, if you listen, about how you can create a beautifully strong culture that just oozes belonging. And we know that time and time again, organizations that have that are more resilient, more effective, and have higher shareholder returns. So there's a huge amount of value in it.
You brought up something that I love, which is talk to your people. So many people don't talk to their internal communities or their external communities, for example. They don't know who their community member is, period, internal or external. When I start working with them, I suspect we get a lot of the same sort of dialogue. And one of my favorite questions, and it's so simple, is ask people how they want to be thanked. And from there, you can start to unravel a lot of what their value set is. Because if that's, I want to get off early on Fridays because my kid plays soccer, great, family first, right? That's a priority. I'm someone who travels a lot. I really like to be async. It's why I designed my company to be all remote. I've had colleagues who wanted to take trips they wouldn't be able to otherwise and, use it as a business guise. Or, it's very seldom that people actually, some people do want to raise. Maybe that makes a difference to them. But, 74% of millennials, the number one thing they care about working, we're the largest working generation, is a sense of purpose. So if I feel heard or listened to or empowered in my work, I'm going to be far more productive for you. And it's amazing. It's an exercise I do every time I onboard a client. It is amazing how long it's been, even within their own personal network, since somebody asked someone how they want to be thanked. Such a simple question. Go home and ask your partner, go home and ask your team how you can thank them for surviving this hellish year and see what happens.
I'm going to try that. Coming back to New Zealand versus the US, I think the society and businesses, it's an issue of scale. In a small, transparent society like New Zealand, it's easier to be accountable when you're seeing people every day or everyone knows everybody. And I think starting with you, Marie, that's one of the challenges. So we're talking to a company a couple of months ago, and this year alone, they've employed close to 1,000 new people. And I said, wow, okay, how do we keep our culture? We're just trying to take people on so quickly. And I think it was Dwayne from Serco made the comment, you've got to start with the culture, not say, hey, the proverbial's hitting the fan, we need culture now. So if you look at New Zealand saying we've got a bunch of companies destined to be big, what does the future look like in terms of what more do we need to do, particularly in New Zealand, as these companies grow, to ensure that the sort of empathetic, direct, transparent, trusting culture survives so they don't just become sausage machines? Maria, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think that it takes a very different leader to be empathetic and humanistic. The profile of leadership has changed significantly. So when I say, what does leadership look like in your organization? It's very, very uncommon that people will say to me, it's somebody that cares. Because generally it was someone who could give clear instruction and say, what was the ROI of doing action? There wasn't this, you've got some people turning up. There wasn't it wasn't a humanistic approach. So for me, I think probably one of the most critical, and this is again a golden thread that runs throughout the session, a way of scaling a fantastic culture is really about role modeling and leadership. So it's all about, and that again is very closely tied with trust. It's about leaders walking the talk. It's about leaders saying being consistent. It's about leaders having a psychological contract with all of their employees. If I say X, Y, and Z, I will give you that. So that trust is there and built. So I think leadership is a fantastic way to continue to grow a culture in a way that even if your organization scales by 1,000, 2,000 in months or years, that consistency of leaders' behavior, communication remains that solid anchor for the growth of that organization.
Don't lose your Kiwi. Stop trying to be Americans when you leave New Zealand. It breaks my heart. I see such a beautiful sense of community and culture. And in Maori culture, like, you have such a beautiful thing going on there, and you go abroad and you think you need to be us. What example are we? What, like, on the happiness scale, on the anything scale, like, yeah, we're a monolith, but we are not an example of mental health, family health, of really, and we're not the best at anything, except for we have a lot of venture capital. That's it. That's what you're getting from the US. So I think what happens is when people come to the United States, they try and assimilate and be us. There are 150 million of us. There are 5 million of you. The 5 million of you are far more unique than the 150 million of us. So take what was you and magic there and bring that everywhere, and bring the Kiwi culture that worked for the 15 people working down in the viaduct over to SF or Denver or the UK or wherever that is. And don't change for us. Obviously ask questions and learn and explore, and there's going to be some fun. But the Americans on my team who have never been to New Zealand, they get so excited when we get a Kiwi client. It's a totally different cultural experience for us as consultants, and it's truly a joy. So don't homogenize. Celebrate what makes you quirky and fun and unique, and just bring that everywhere. It's so magical, and it makes me so sad when I see people be shy and be tall poppies. So if you take nothing from me, from this whole conversation, know that you're special, that your culture inspires me in all of my work as a community member or manager, really, and leader. And my whole thing and my vision for the next 50 years is to try and export the magic you've created in a way that scales empathy globally. So you're doing it all right. Don't stop. I'm actually at a community pool right now, so if anyone's curious, these are not my family members or my friends. These are just some lovely folks. In transparency today, actually, I'm off today. I just had a massage and did a mud bath, which was my first personal pamper treat. So I hope I'm not looking too intense right now. I thought this was tomorrow. I got my dateline mixed up. But that said, my team knows I'm taking a personal day because we just closed a whole bunch of business. So as a leader, you have to reward yourself, and also, I don't want to say punish yourself, but show up when the work needs to be done. I just want to point something out that I thought was so cool, because Dwayne's not here with us today. But so after our chat that you all just watched, Dwayne sent me a message afterwards to say how refreshed he was that I called out him talking about the pandemic in past tense. And I think that it was nice for two reasons. One, obviously, Dwayne's a totally transparent, cool, empathetic leader like he claimed he was. So +1 for him and actually practicing what he preaches. But the thing that I really want to point out is I could tell by the fact that he sent me that message, there are not enough people challenging him every day. There are not enough people that feel comfortable. And challenge doesn't I'm not talking like fight. But what I can tell is there aren't enough people in the dialogue that feel comfortable to say, hey, we're a really international company and your language is really post-pandemic. The UK just went into the next lockdown. The United States is in their third lockdown. Maybe we should actually talk about this culturally as a company, or do a whole empathy workshop, or whatever that is. So points to him for reaching back out to me. I think we now built a really cool bridge and hopefully get to continue working together. I'm going to stop now, but I love New Zealand. You're all beautiful, and thanks for having me.
Thanks, Evie. Dale, now you can wrap up. So do you feel under a pressure to be transparent, empathetic, and be an example to your team?
Oh, absolutely, every day. I think Maria's point about leading from the front, making sure that you walk the walk and actually, do all the things that you talk about. Really important. I think just reflecting back on the question, I think, Greg, which was about how we take more New Zealand companies like Javelin further by scaling and bringing culture through that growth path. I'd put the challenge out there amongst the really successful New Zealand businesses that have been able to scale and actually say, hey guys, there's a cohort of organisations like Javelin and Fuel 50 and others that could really benefit from the scars and the history and what you've done. I certainly would welcome the opportunity to talk more with those sorts of organisations. And whether that comes out of this, that'd be great. But there's a lot of lessons that are being learnt scaling those businesses and in a one-to-many relationship. I think we could take a whole lot of us further. So that is out there.
Yeah, so I'm getting the sales cue from Bettina. Yes, you can become a TIN member and join with those CEOs. And in fact, really coming back to that, one of the reasons we started those chats is so many people going through this journey alone, thinking, wow, am I up to the task? This is not going according to plan. This staff member seems unhappy. Is anyone else putting up with this crap? And but what I've found, in fact, that rather than being a sort of a dumping ground, it's been those conversations were incredibly inspiring in terms of the vertical learning curve. And all of them were around just basically starting with that empathy position and transparency. So the more people can share those stories and upgrade themselves both as an individual and as a CEO, that's kind of the mission really much of TIN. And there's no reason why the issues of looking after people, looking after the environment, and creating prosperity should be at conflict with each other. And I kind of see New Zealand as the genesis of a sort of re-emergence of that kind of movement where prosperity comes from serving these other more holistic values. So when Savvy's next in town, we'll get together for
Yes, please.
a drink or a coffee or something and chew the fat some more. But hey, a big thanks to you, Savvy, for coming from the States. For Maria, fantastic. And Dale,
Sure.
yeah, hope to meet you all again. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks, Greg.
Bye. Thank you.
Excellent.
Don't
Thanks
be
all.
strangers, friends.
Bye-bye.